Had a very interesting childhood, ended up moving to a place called Big Oak Ranch, which is a Christian home for children needing a chance. There's kids there who are neglected, abused, abandoned. I lived there through high school. And in college, another family took me in. They're like an adopted family to me now. Becoming VP cost them their marriage. It cost them, relationships with their kids. And they're like, you want to get married one day. Our advice to you is go find something else to do that allows you to prioritize what's important. Ambition is not a bad thing. It's stewarding your gifts, stewarding what you're called to do, and stewarding relationships.
Joining me to talk about the Monolithic Man project is Paul Bullard. Great to have you, sir.
Ken, thank you, man. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
All right. So I got 4 research questions for you today. But before we jump into that, I'd love to give you a chance to tell us about yourself, your background, your family, and of course, plug any projects that you're currently
working. Yeah. Married, a wonderful wife. I got 3 kids, 2 girls, 6 and 3, and a son who is 1. I work in what I would call higher education ministry. I work as a strategist with several departments across the institution. I am a poet. I write poetry. I went to Auburn University for that. Original plan was to teach, but I was a English major. You can actually find my poetry at creativityandculture.com. That's my Substack. I am, running a live stream experiment myself called Daily Reads. You can check that out. And a little bit about my background. I had a very interesting childhood, ended up moving to a place called Big Oak Ranch, which is a Christian home for children needing a chance. After that, had a family take me in and have an adopted family now. And crazy life experience. I hope that sets up for some interesting answers, right? But glad to be here.
You mentioned that you went to a ranch and a family adopted you from there. Yeah. You said that's a Christian ministry?
A family took me in after I left the ranch. I was actually in college at that point, but
Gotcha.
I went to live at the ranch. It is a Christian ministry. I went to live there early on in high school, and that's a whole story just from family dysfunction. It's like several houses, like its own little suburb. You have house parents, and there's kids there who are neglected, abused, abandoned. I mean, everything you can imagine. And I lived there through high school, and in college, another family took me in before I was really established, and that's actually they're like an adopted family to me now. Like they're grandparents for my kids. There's a verse, Psalm 68:8, that says, "The Lord places the lonely in families," and families is plural, and that has literally been true throughout my life.
I would imagine that affects how you parent your kids now, having grown up in that situation.
Yes, it does. So my kids do not have any sense of like what life was like when I was a kid. They live in a clean house. They have parents who are engaged and show love to each other and to them. Just completely different world. I know what it's like to not have, encouragement, to have, your parents or your dad be physically present, but not actually engaged in anything. And so one of my favorite things to do is play with my kids. I'm actually next to a window right now. They're outside playing with neighbors, and my wife is outside watching them. But it's just a completely different. There's grace, there's a whole lot of joy that they get to experience. I didn't get to experience as a kid. But yeah, before I moved to the ranch, I thought most of my life was normal. I didn't really have an idea of what I was missing until I was put into an environment where I could see what healthy looked like. And so I learned a lot of what not to do as a kid just from my own growing up. But then God placed me in families that set the model like, hey, here's how a loving marriage looks like. Here's what a healthy environment looks like. Here's what chores, self-respect, confidence, all that kind of stuff looks like. So it has very much shaped how I parent my kids.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That leads me to the Monolithic Man project. The idea is that ambition will erode your family unless you put in place intentional systems that protect that in the home. And presence is the cornerstone. Without it, our kids don't know who we are, and we lose sight of the main mission. So the way that I'm putting it is that your family's the main mission, everything else is secondary.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of times, as people talk about calling, and whatever you're called to do, your family's your first calling. God may be calling someone, if they want to go be a missionary, that's great. You can be a missionary to your family first. You may want to, start a business, that's great, but manage your household first, right? And your family is your biggest calling. There is being a father and a husband, biggest calling by far. And if you can't do those right, you might be successful otherwise, but that's a great path to a whole lot of regret, a whole lot of pain, a whole lot of missed opportunities, especially as you get older.
So, with the monolithic man thesis that I presented, that ambition will break your home if you don't put in place intentional systems, what are your thoughts on that? I'm trying to get 100 guys' opinions on how that thesis fits into their life.
Yeah, so I have probably a little bit different experience in that. When I was single, I volunteered. I said I work in higher education ministries. I work for a private Christian university, and my path to getting there involved, years of a lot of volunteer work and really giving time. Now, I wanted to, but it was just it helped open the doors, but that's what came before, right? But being around all of that, you see two things, and especially like if you're pursuing a calling, you see people who they'll make sacrifices, but they'll still keep their priorities straight, and you see people who make sacrifices and they'll sacrifice what's important. And if someone really, they just really want to go work for a church somewhere and they just go all in, do everything, whatever, but they don't spend time like they're missing their kids' like dance recitals or birthday party, like just stuff that there's just no like other people can do things, right? Go to your kid's birthday party. I'm thinking of actual stories someone shared with me, and it just doesn't justify it. So there was a season in my life where I very briefly worked for a quick oil change company. I was a manager in training, and it didn't take me long to figure out I wasn't a big fan. It wasn't the career field for me. I enjoyed being on my feet, talking to people, and it wasn't a bad job. It was an interesting job. It was a hard job, but I had multiple people who were very successful in that company tell me if I wanted to have this. I was still single at the time. If I wanted to have a family, I needed to go find something else to do because of the hours demanded of you and the hours demanded you to be successful. Several of them that were successful, they had becoming VP cost them their marriage. It cost them, relationships with their kids. And it wasn't just one, it was several. And when they're like great people who work there and they're like, you're still single, you want to get married one day, our advice to you is go find something else to do that allows you to prioritize what's important, right? And because they had already pursued ambition and let that sacrifice what was important. So I think like if you steward ambition well, I think ambition gets a bad rap sometimes. You know,
Yeah.
being in a ministry
Especially in the
context,
church.
I've heard people talk about like, if you have ambition, you're selfish, and they just very condemning and judgmental about it. And I'm thinking like, do you have ambition? Because how do you get to where you like? It's kind of hypocritical, really. So ambition itself is not bad. I think ambition can be very good. How you steward it, it can be a good driving force. Like it's something to lean into and to embrace. But you also got to have ambition to raise my family and lead my family well, to raise my kids well. And so that ambition is not a bad thing, but put systems around it to where you can steward it well and steward what matters well.
Yeah, I haven't heard that phrase yet before. Steward your ambition. I really like that. And you've named the tension well, which is that we have a built-in ambition we want to provide, especially men who are driven.
Yeah.
We're going to try to do really well. We're going to try to
Yeah.
build this empire. And that's a good thing, but what I think the world gets wrong oftentimes is that ambition, that empire needs to serve the home. So I think you named that tension well. The second question, this is the most important one. This is the one that's been the most fun so far, is actually getting the tactical advice that men have. And it's interesting. Every interview I've held, somebody's brought in something new that I haven't thought of before. So what mechanisms, this can be systems, rules, traditions, rituals, anything you want to call it, do you use to make sure you're more present in the home?
It is just making the choice ahead of time that that's going to be a priority. And that's really like half of it. The way I'm going to say it is paraphrasing Scott Adams. He has a reframe about wanting versus deciding. A lot of people can say, I want to be a better father, so I'm going to do this, whatever. Instead of want, you just decide. You like, I am going to be the best father I can be, or I am a father, and I'm going to be the best. Like, so you make this decision, and then you set up the systems that come next. So focusing just on this decision part, taking this to the deepest level I can. When I lived at the ranch, I have some lifelong friends who also lived there that have been successful. There was also a lot of kids that they lived there, they were given every opportunity, and then it's like they leave or they graduate high school and they go right back to the habits that were and the things that were instilled into them before they moved there. And the difference was people that decided they wanted to change and those who they didn't want to. Like you can give people every opportunity in the world to have a life they could have never dreamed of. And sometimes that's just holding a steady job, being off drugs and being married and having kids, right? So you can offer every opportunity you want, but unless they decide they actually want that, it doesn't matter. So first part is deciding. You have to decide That's important. And the second part is you can't just have a bunch of goals that you want to do. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that language, but this is the other half. This is a Scott Adams reframe is systems over goals. I was doing this before I read this book, but that's how I would phrase it now. One of the systems is every morning I get up, I drink my coffee, I read my Bible, and I do some journaling. And it is every morning. I can count on my hands how many times I was not able to read my Bible in the morning, and I still made sure to read some kind of scripture verse later, even if it's on my phone. Doing that sets my whole day straight. I have a better attitude. Everything is better from that point forward. When I start the day right, I give it to God and I spend time in His Word. So that would be one system. Another would be like we don't, schedules. We don't always eat around the dinner table every single day, but we do at least once a week is the bare minimum. But it's just the goal is we're going to have one day where we just, hey, what's for dinner? All right, I'll be home. Boom, we're going to eat together. And it's just little things like that. Some people are very system organized. I am in some ways. I just roll with it. Like I'm a very flexible person. And I think that's part of one of my strengths. But if you systematize, like here is the value and the system is I'm going to like every day just take actions that prioritize that value. Another one is at bedtime. After bath, it is family time. Phones are down. We are playing together. We're just having family time together. And then, the kids go to bed. So it's a whole routine, but it is a sacred time. And it's systematized without thinking of it as a system. It's just something we do. It's not a negotiable. It's decided upon based on our values, and we make that time. It's a decision that we made.
The word that I like to use, and I use system in the thesis, but the word that I like to use is mechanism. That is something that
Yeah.
we implement. It's repeatable, it's observable,
Yeah.
it's measurable. It's these things that we can do. So what you described there is at bedtime, you described a mechanism, which is really cool. That's one I haven't heard yet. I've heard different things like dinner time, sacred. Every night we do dinner time, phones down. But I really like that you guys have a bedtime routine. That's a mechanism that I really like. Are there any other traditions that you follow on a weekly or monthly or even annual basis that you would say fit into this idea of mechanisms? Maybe not a system, but it's a mechanism, a tool you use to get closer to your family.
Take advantage of the weather, right? So being flexible is strength of mind. But like today, it's nice weather. One of the things that my kids love doing, I love doing it, and my kids love doing it now, is we'll go hiking together. But the system or the mechanism is the weather's nice, we're going to go outside. So that's the first part of it. Beyond that, the mechanism is there are a lot of kids out, we call friends out. If they're outside, our kids, they really love that. Let's let them play with some kids, especially because they're homeschool.
That's awesome. Another mechanism I've heard a lot from guys that I've talked to is the idea of a Sabbath. I wanted to get your idea of, do you take a Sabbath? Is that something that's important to you guys?
It's typically a Saturday for me, but it can sometimes be a Sunday. It just depends. But we do take a Sabbath where I don't, regardless Sabbath or not, I don't, unless it's something that's pre-planned or an emergency, I don't check work emails on the weekend or at night. If I have people that need to have my phone number. If it was a true emergency, they could text me. But typically that stuff is gonna, it ain't that important, right?
It's
And
going to
and
wait till Monday.
it'll wait till Monday. And if you're doing a side hustle or doing, work for somebody, and I've done bits and pieces of things there, it's still important to have a Sabbath scheduled because you're sacrificing time with your family. You can do that, but still schedule Sabbath time. A Sabbath for me involves doing stuff that's different from what I typically do, and that helps me to rest. A lot of times that involves being creative, being active. So mowing the lawn might be something I would do on a Sabbath. I wear a weighted vest when I do it, so I turn it behind
There
a
you
push
go.
mower, so I turn it into a workout. Some people, that would not be what they would need to do on a Sabbath. So everyone's a little different there, but
For sure.
100% take a Sabbath.
Now, you mentioned wearing a weighted vest while you're mowing the lawn. How does fitness play into your life?
I love it. So my wife the other day was being silly, making this joke like, "My name's Paul. I like politics and poetry and physical." It's just trying to make the P and physical
Yeah.
sound like and just anyway. I was an athlete in high school. I do jujitsu now, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Love that. Love challenging myself. The challenge and what you can do, like the sense of accomplishment and how it builds confidence and really being physically healthy. Like a big motivation for me being healthy is so it allows me to play with my kids. It allows me to fly my kids around, like pick them up. My 6-year-old, pick her up, fly her around, as well as my 3-year-old and my 1-year-old, because I want to be able to do that as long as I can. Eventually, they're going to get too big for me to do that reliably. And if not them, by the time they have kids and my grandkids are being flown around. I want to be able to at least fly them around when they're little, and that requires taking care of my body. I write better poetry when I'm physically active, when I feel good. It just all bleeds into each other. So it's to me, it's like if I'm going to push mow, why not make it a cool challenge? Put a vest on, and then I've turned it into a nice little workout. I just enjoy that.
Now, so fitness is a mechanism, and I talked to Tyler Tote recently. I don't know if you follow him on X, but you definitely should. And he actually had a controversial take on this. He said that faith comes first, obviously. He puts fitness next and then his family. And it's not saying that your workouts matter more than your family, but it's this idea that your health is something that you can never get back. And you can't take care of your family well if you're not healthy. Where would you put, faith, fitness, family? How would you order that? Or would you agree to some extent that your fitness and staying healthy is something you got to do?
He's a great guy. So faith does come first. That God's first. There's no negotiating there. I'm sure he would say this if someone were holding a gun to your head and they're like, you can only spend time with your family or you can only work out. Well, everyone's going to pick family, right? But the point is, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of other people. So the Bible says, love your neighbor as yourself. If you don't love yourself, you're not going to love your neighbor very well. That's people. A lot of people who they hate, like they're so hateful to others, they hate themselves, right? Because they're giving out to everybody the way they view themselves. If you don't take care of yourself physically, you're going to have less energy. You're not going to be the best you can be for your family. Now, that doesn't mean put fitness over family as like fitness becomes a god. There's people that do that. They spend so much time training for a marathon that they miss their kids' birthday. They're never present for their kids. I know that's not what he means. I could say, faith and creativity or poetry and then family, right? I don't actually mean it in a very literal sense. I mean it like if I'm stewarding my talents the way God made me, I'm healthier when I write poetry, when have a creative outlet, and that makes me better for my family. That's what that means. It is taking care of yourself so you can serve others. Because if you're starving, for something, it's going to be hard to give that to someone else, right?
The way that I'm seeing this is that Jason in interview number 1 talked about this. He talked about sacrificing his own sleep to do the things that he wanted to do. He was writing a book, so he would get up early and write his book early in the morning. And I know Tyler does this, and I know that a lot of men try to do this. We actually sacrifice our own sleep to get to fitness. So what we're doing is we're not actually sacrificing family time, or we're not putting
Yeah.
fitness over family as a god. But
Yeah.
what we are doing is we're saying that fitness and health matters. I'm putting this first, as in it's one of the first things I get up and do in the day, sacrificing my own sleep. So I just love how the tension of those two things comes together.
You always got to sacrifice something to give it to something else. And there's seasons. There's seasons where you have to certain things more, but a season should never excuse. You gotta put things in perspective. You may have a season where you could sacrifice more to write a book, but your 1-year-old is only gonna be one for 1 year and two for one. Like, so is that worth sacrificing, or maybe take a little more time and write that book and be healthy for your kids and be present for your kids.
That's great. That's a great segue into the next question, which is how do you navigate busy seasons?
So I have historically just been a power through it, flexible, whatever. I am the kind of person. So I'm going to say I say this not to brag, and it probably I don't know if people would even think of it as bragging anyway. They wouldn't connect, but I have like in my work that I do, I have a reputation for able to get a lot done. Typically, the amount of work two people could do, I can do, and still have time left over. Partly just work fast. Part of it's just efficiency, seeing how to do things. I learn quick. A whole lot of it goes into that, right? So I've always been high capacity in that sense. So busyness for me is not always that bad of a thing, but it's something I'm actually kind of wondering if I need to grow more with, because I have in my work that I do now, um, as a strategist, there's a lot of hurry up and wait. And so it's busy without being busy, but at any moment it can be busy again. And so it's almost like learning to pace yourself differently, that I have in a lot of ways in the past. About 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with mild Guillain-Barré syndrome. I had the worst stomach bug I'd ever had in my life, and after that, all these like peripheral neuropathy symptoms started. This it's a disease basically where your immune system overreacts to a disease and attacks your nervous system. I'm going to a neurologist again currently, getting other tests done we're making sure that's still the case because there's still symptoms from it. So if I have this staticky tendonitis that's always in the background, and it's very, very low most of the time and not there, but when I'm tired or when I'm sick or when I'm stressed, it'll be a lot louder. And it'll be louder at the end of the day after I've been busy all day. So it almost tells me like if it's louder for a few days in a row, I'm about to get sick or I need to chill out. I'm too stressed or I need to get more rest. And so I have this immediate feedback loop now going physically from that is making me think, well, I'm expending more energy than I realized, because I'm just so used to being high paced, high performing, and all that. So it's challenging me because it's making me emphasize being more strategic with rest because I am the guy. I love doing like challenging myself and all that. But it's so rest is something that I'm growing in personally. I think it is important. You know, everybody online likes to talk about hustle. You know, got to go get it, got to hustle, blah blah blah. Yes, that is all true. But you got to steward rest well. You got to rest well to stay strong. If you ever do any kind of physical competition, you're gonna you're gonna be pretty awful at it if you're not rested the night before. Same principle applies to every single day in life. So that rest is a big part of navigating busy. And otherwise, it's just being able to say no to things. I am not scared to say no. It doesn't it doesn't matter unless it's going to cause the earth to explode or some crazy thing to happen. You know, in what you're doing with your work or whatever. You don't have to say yes to it. You don't have to say yes to a million billion different things. I think sometimes people feel pressure to. They feel like they won't succeed or they'll miss some opportunity. I think on that you trust God. If you are excellent at what you do, what you steward, opportunities are going to come because people are going to see that, and it opens the doors for opportunity. So I think people put pressure on themselves, but you have to be able to be confident in who you are to say no, and you got to rest well. That's my two things: confidence in who you are to say no, and rest well.
That's really cool. The theme of this episode is clearly stewardship. That's something that's really important to you. Talk about what stewardship means to you.
For a long time, I would say take ownership. You take ownership of what you do, you own it, blah blah blah. And then it hit me one day. Instead of taking ownership, it's really needs to be reframed to take stewardship, meaning that everything we are given to us by God. I have breath in my lungs because God created me. I have the talents I have because God created me. I can take ownership, you know, and I just nothing. It's semantics to a degree, but it's also a mind shift sit of I'm going to take ownership of my work and my family. Anyone that says that, there's nothing wrong with that. But when I'm going to take stewardship of it, it puts it in perspective that there's a bigger purpose. There's an eternity. There's someone else, something else is at play. And what's at play is there's a creator who created me in his image, and there's an eternity that matters. And so what I'm doing is not just to take ownership to make it the best it can be. I'm stewarding it to make it the best it can be in light of eternity and to make a difference that goes well beyond me, just generational blessings. Stewardship, and it also takes focus off of self. You're less, I think, taking ownership can get, not always, but it can get twisted into like a self-focused thing. But if you take stewardship, stewardship cannot be separated, that it's not just all about you. And I like the framing of that because it keeps things in perspective.
Yeah, that's great. The hustle culture thing is really important. And I usually say this in the beginning, but something I always like to clarify is that the Monolithic Man Project is not manosphere or red pill. It's not hustle culture,
Yes. Yeah, that dude, I've never been in that, but just no normal person that I know takes that stuff seriously. I think people who are morbidly online, lack confidence and they need something. They need something. There's some pain, some hurt, whatever in their life. They need something. But I'll tell you this, if anyone who calls themselves an alpha is probably not. I've never heard a normal person call themselves that in real life anyway. Can you imagine someone walking up to you, yeah, I'm an alpha. Like you think they're crazy. That's
Yeah.
the craziest thing you could like. There's nothing normal about that. So I'm not about anyway. I'm not about that
Yeah.
life either.
But this project is actually a little bit in answer to that, where I was thinking about how people call themselves alpha males and all this stuff, and I don't. Everybody in my life who is what you would actually consider an alpha, they are the most humble people you know, and you
Yeah.
probably experienced the same thing. And so what
Yes.
I started playing around with was this idea of these guys are actually monolithic. They are strong across all domains. They're very present. They're very stable. They're indomitable. But they are not domineering in any way. So that's where I came up with the name for the Monolithic Man. But you're able to integrate your strengths across the work, across home, and across community. I don't always talk about it in every interview, but community is an important part of the Monolithic Man project. So I have 6 kids of my own. I'm working 3 jobs. My wife stays at home and homeschools, which is great. And I'm usually working. It's, my presence, guarding my presence in the home is really important now. And we're very active in our church. So, the last research question I have for you is, what are your thoughts on this idea of integrated strength? Which is, if you're good at something at work, if you're good at something with your friends, you should also be good at that in the home. But also, you and your wife combining your strengths, integrating your strengths together for the main mission.
It's a good question. So I think first up, you can't people like to compartmentalize their life. You can't really do that. I mean, you might be able to do it to a little bit of a degree, but everything bleeds into everything. So, the better your home life is, the better you're going to be in the work you do because you're less stressed. Likewise, if your work is real stressful, you're probably going to be taking that home at some point, unless you learn how to, you know, let it not stress you out basically, right? There is no if it can be stressful and be a good kind of stress versus the kind of stress that's negative. I think, so let's creativity. I do a lot of creative problem solving. I write poetry. It shows up there. And my kids and how we play together. Like I use creativity there. Um, let's, build with something with Legos or Duplos or um, my wife is very artistic, in a different sense of like crafts and watercolors and flower arrangements and decorating the house, all that kind of stuff. So that also bleeds into our kids are learning those things. But really, I mean, the best way to integrate something is just to do your talent well. It's going to show up in the home. There might not be an expression of I'm not, meeting with my kids and we're not having project strategy meetings because what in the world, right? But it is still something like that those talents bleed into conversations or into, how, if my kids are asking questions about something and I want to teach them something, right? So I think it's just you embrace who God made you to be and you steward things well. And
I think the way that you brought it up is really great. Stewardship, again, the theme of this episode. Steward your strengths. God has gifted you with different gifts and strengths, and your wife as well. Integrating those together for the main mission, which is building
yeah.
a family that honors God. I think that that's really what it comes down to. And again, these are research questions. So the idea is, how is the tension working out? Is it an accurate tension measuring the fact that I know guys who are really good at communication, they're really good at ministry, and then they go home and they're not good at those things in their home. So just looking for any thoughts you have on how you integrate your strengths and what you're good at, your gifts back in the home, making sure that you're monolithic. You're the same person at work, you're the same person at home. It helps, like you said, it helps both domains, which is really huge. But I think your answer about stewardship really is the right way to think about it.
So I've had a lot of experience leading volunteers, and I've always been mindful like there people are sacrificing their time, they're giving their time, and so you want to be encouraging, give them vision, that kind of stuff. It's easy. The Where it breaks down is when you take something for granted. If you take people's volunteer service for granted, you're not going to be as encouraging. You're not going to communicate as well. It is easy to take your spouse for granted. You live in a house together. You see each other every single day. So if you take someone for granted, you might have less grace for it, something. You might communicate more bluntly, and that's okay to be more blunt with people you're close to. But also, you still have your words seasoned with grace and love, right? I mean, that's something I've seen in myself, but I think that's taking something for granted, and the opposite of that is gratitude, right? One of my first life verses was Colossians 3:15. The peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you were called to peace and be thankful. And that last part, be thankful, is what holds the whole other thing together. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, peace in your heart. That gratitude is what holds it there. As members of one body, you were called to peace. So that's relationships. Gratitude holds those relationships together. Gratitude holds it all together. If you are grateful for volunteers giving their time, it's going to be very easy to communicate well with them. If you're grateful for people you work with, some service, whatever. If you're grateful for your wife or you're grateful for your kids or your family that God's given you, it's going to be a lot easier to communicate well, to show those things. And I think gratitude gets down to it. And that's something, it's not like we actively think if you were to ask anyone, of course I'm grateful, right? But I think there's some level of it that gets displaced by taking something for granted without us realizing it. And that's where you have to be intentional. So I mentioned reading my Bible every morning. That helps me stay grateful for what God's given me because it puts it in perspective of God's word. Likewise, praying for your spouse, for your family, that you pray for somebody, you're asking God to cover them. We say family prayers every single night. We pray for each other like that. Even with, we say thank you, God, but even if you don't say thank you for this person, which we actually do, so that instills gratitude, like you're praying over them, that value of gratitude is going to be within that because you're grateful for them. Otherwise, why pray for them, right? So it's if people have problem or are struggling being the same at home as they are somewhere where they excel, and of course take it context, all that. I would be willing to bet that gratitude is part of the equation at least. There's I'm not a marriage coach or all that, so I'm sure there's a
Same.
lot more that can go into it, but I think gratitude is a big part of it.
Right. I love that. Yeah, being grateful for what your wife is doing, whether that's, a lot of the guys so
Yeah,
far, their wives are at home, homeschooling their kids. That's a big
mine is
part of
too.
it. Being grateful for the time that you have. You mentioned some potential health issues, and I also have some health issues going on. So for me, it's being grateful for the time that I have with my kids because I'm not going to be here forever. And I know that at the end of my life, I'm not going to regret the things that I did. The working more and all that. That's going to be great. But I am going to regret any time that I didn't spend with the kids that I could have taken. All
Cool,
right.
man.
Well, that's the Monolithic Man project. I appreciate you taking the time to talk today, Paul. It was great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, man. It was an honor. I had a blast.